I think, today is a significant day in Gaza, in the besieged Gaza Strip. There have been 11 weeks of blockade of food, which has brought conditions to famine levels in certain areas of Gaza. Israel has been, in addition to assassinating Hamas personnel to prevent the adequate distribution of aid through traditional UN lines, what they've been doing is emboldening gangs, including figures connected to ISIS smuggling networks in the Sinai Peninsula, to steal the aid and then sell it at inflated prices. And by creating the crisis, they create the impetus for completely changing aid distribution. Now, the US could easily have stepped in, the Trump administration, and said, we're going to suspend arms shipments and until you enact a ceasefire and you open up all distribution points. But they didn't do that. Instead, this network of shady NGOs and fake charities was set up to completely subvert the UN system, to take the United Nations, UNRWA, out of Gaza. And this is all part of regime change in Gaza and ultimately part of occupation and ethnic cleansing. And we'll get into the details here. But today was the day when this new aid system was supposed to be implemented. It's been a complete failure, a complete catastrophe, leading to stampedes, concentration camp scenes where people from Gaza have been, there you go. I mean, that was the featured image on this stream. And this is how people in Gaza are supposed to get their food now. They have to march across kilometers and kilometers of an active war zone, where they can easily be targeted by drones, quadricopters, snipers, and then get to this point where they're put in cattle pens, and then they wait there as American mercenaries doing static protection, allow them to get like a box of food. And they're all doing this on behalf of Israel. So it led to catastrophe and chaos. But how did we get here? I think that's what we need to address, since we haven't done a stream in like a month. And Aaron, what's your sense of how it got to this point? Because honestly, I mean, you would have thought that the genocide would have been wrapped up by now. Even Trump said there's nothing else for Israel to gain. They're just wasting time.
Yeah, and he also said a lot of people are starving and suffering. We're going to do something about it. But so far, what Trump has done is continue to give Israel the green light. And we thought maybe there was a breakthrough a few weeks ago when the U.S. bypassed Israel, at least as far as we could tell, and directly negotiated with Hamas to free Israeli-American soldier, IDF soldier, Adon Alexander. And there was an agreement there made between Hamas and Steve Witkoff, in which Adon Alexander would be freed, and Hamas got nothing officially in return. Like, nothing was announced. But what emerged later, Hamas officials said, was that Witkoff told them that if they can free Adon Alexander, then Trump will basically end the blockade, and Trump will push for permanent ceasefire talks. And by all appearances, the Trump administration reneged on that, gave Hamas absolutely nothing. So it looks like the Trump administration, if Hamas's claims are correct, completely played Hamas. And and then it makes you think, like this was, happen as this was happening, like the media was getting all these reports fed from the White House, people around the White House. There's a big rift between Trump and Netanyahu, and that Trump is defying Netanyahu. And now, especially in retrospect, that looks like a giant con, that there is no rift between Trump and Netanyahu, at least on Gaza, maybe on the Iran talks, but at least on Gaza, because when it came to freeing Adon Alexander, Hamas got absolutely nothing in return. And Witkoff betrayed his promise.
Yeah. And I guess the report was from Drop Site. Jeremy Scahill's, got Osama Hamdan and Bassem Naim on the line consistently. And those are like the two front-facing figures from Hamas that speak to English language media. If we've interviewed them. I interviewed Osama Hamdan in Istanbul. You've interviewed Bassem Naim. And like, they're like spokesmen. And if you ask them political questions or say, you know, do you think October 7th was wise, blah, 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 they're going to give you spin like any spokesman. But if you ask them for details about the negotiations, they pretty much have to tell the truth. And they've been telling the truth over and over, unlike the Israelis. So I think it's a credible report by Jeremy Scahill at Drop Site, and the Western media is not really giving them a voice. And and what they show time and time again is that they accept a US proposal, then the Israelis reject the proposal, and then someone like Steve Witkoff will come back and say Hamas is making unacceptable demands, and he will completely renege on the proposal he put forward in order to accommodate Israeli demands. And yeah, there were some kind of war of words or tension between Trump and the Israelis when Trump went to Riyadh and all the Gulf states. He bypassed Israel. Pete Hegseth actually canceled a trip to Israel. We don't know why. Netanyahu was angry and the Israelis were angry that Trump accepted a ceasefire with Ansar Allah in Yemen, called them brave, but did not demand that they stop launching missiles toward Israel. But ultimately, like, the trip to the Gulf amounted to nothing but kind of transactional payoffs to Trump, bribery in broad daylight, but there was no real geopolitical agenda that we could deduce from that trip that drew any daylight between Trump and Israel.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this comes after Israel did sabotage the first round of direct U.S. Hamas talks back in March, when Adam Boehler, who was Trump's hostage envoy, he had direct talks with Hamas officials. And that's when he, notably came out on CNN and said that the U.S. is not an agent of Israel and we can make our own decisions. And he even said the Hamas guys were nice guys and he liked talking to them. And they, Adam Boehler talked about, their discussions were not just about freeing Adon Alexander, but also a long-term truce. And he said, we have a real possibility of having a long-term ceasefire for over many years. And that's when he got pulled from the scene because Israel complained, and Israel, put out some strategically timed leaks to undermine Adam Boehler. But these talks again, so what freed Adon Alexander was a more recent round of talks, which was successful. But it strikes me as if the U.S. and Israel had some sort of understanding that basically whatever the U.S. would agree to, they wouldn't follow through on, because they didn't, and the genocide continues.
So it was like a gentleman's agreement that should have been put in writing that the U.S. would force Israel to end the siege of Gaza, allow humanitarian aid in, and enact a fairly long temporary ceasefire that was going to lead to a permanent ceasefire. And yeah, Witkoff totally reneged. And one of the pieces of evidence that I would point to is that Witkoff's son, Alex Witkoff, retweeted this tweet by Jason Meister. President Trump and Steve Witkoff saved Adon Alexander's life. No pallets of cash, no prisoner swaps, and no terrorists released. Every single American, regardless of political affiliation, should be proud of this historic moment. So basically, they didn't give Hamas anything in exchange, and they're bragging about it. And his son is boasting about this through retweet. I mean, the retweet was clearly an endorsement. And that is just horrendous diplomacy that echoed or resonated very negatively in Iran, where I was at the time speaking to Iranian negotiators. They saw this as evidence of the bad faith of the U.S. and that the U.S. is not trustworthy. And so what did Israel proceed to do after getting Adon Alexander? Slaughter hundreds and hundreds of civilians. And I mean, we could show you images of charred children, doctor coming to work at the hospital and finding 8 of her 9 children slaughtered. I mean,
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. Sorry, girl seeking to escape her burning home as her family burns to death and barely escaping with wounds all over her body. I mean, the unspeakable horrors continue to pour out of Gaza, and it's all thanks to this horrendous U.S. diplomacy where Steve Witkoff real estate lawyer, has turned into the latest Jewish American diplomat to serve as Israel's lawyer. And here we are today. And by the way, I mean, what the hell is going on in Edon Alexander's hometown? And what the hell was he doing there in the first place? He wasn't just some hostage. He was a prisoner of war who was an American, Jewish American, who was propagandized by Zionism and decided to fight for a foreign apartheid occupation army. There's not any reason to celebrate this figure. He was enforcing siege and serving basically as a concentration camp guard inside a tank inside Gaza on October 7th. It wasn't like he was just some innocent Jewish victim of anti-Semitism. And this is what was going on in Tenafly, New Jersey upon his release. Look at this. There's like hardly any even American flags there. And like Trumpers, they freak out anytime they see some like Mexicans waving a Mexican flag in areas that used to be Mexico. But then this is like what they celebrate. An entire community that's been propagandized into believing that they deserve a second country on the back of millions of indigenous people.
And again, how did Adon Alexander look compared to all the Palestinian hostages who come out of Israeli torture dungeons? I mean, again, Hamas treats Israeli captives infinitely better than Israel treats it. Like, you can't even compare it. I mean, you look at Palestinian prisoners, if they make it out alive. I mean, so many haven't. So many have been murdered, including that prominent doctor a few months ago. But, the Palestinian prisoners who come out of Israeli prisons and dungeons, they're emaciated. They've been tortured. They've been seriously abused. Adon Alexander looked pretty good considering what he's been through.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone is coming out of Gaza with any, they've lost weight, it's because everybody's lost weight in Gaza. It's because the caloric intake is plummeted across the Gaza Strip, and they're subjected to the same conditions as everyone else, as well as Israeli airstrikes that have killed dozens of captives in Gaza, including Edon Alexander was almost killed on, I believe it was March 15th or April 15th, when Hamas lost contact with the team that was guarding him, and he turned up alive. But there was this sense that Netanyahu wanted him dead, which is why Edon Alexander did not meet with Netanyahu and held a sign just thanking Donald Trump, because the U.S. engaged in direct negotiations with Hamas and had to circumvent Israel because Israel does not want to end this genocide. And with the reneging on the deal to allow humanitarian aid in and have a temporary ceasefire after Edon Alexander's release, Israel embarked on an apocalyptic final solution operation in Gaza. And they believe that this will lead to total victory. And what does total victory mean? Total victory means 75% of Gaza will be immediately occupied. It's the Wall Street Journal on Israel's plan for Gaza. Israel aims to control 75% of Gaza in 2 months, military says. And that's part of what the aid distribution plan is about, because they're going to put the aid distribution points mainly in the areas where they want to concentrate the population, keeping them out of central and northern Gaza. They're going to concentrate them all around Rafah. And then from there, they're going to start trying to push them out into Egypt.
Yeah.
Netanyahu even said as much. He's making it seem like, oh, the world and all these acts of God have forced Gaza to be blocked off. But we think that, people should be free to leave. They shouldn't be held in prison, because the plan is ethnic cleansing.
Which is how all this began in 1948, with ethnic cleansing, and Israel just trying to finish the job. And in many of the same ways that they did in 1948, with mass terror and taking advantage of the opportunity that they feel they have right now for a final solution. That's why, today, this incident today at the so-called aid distribution center was in the South. And what are they trying to do there? It seems as if, like now in the Western media, it's reported there was chaos and U.S. Israeli contractors lost control, but this seems like this was deliberate. They want a crisis. They want an excuse to pen people, cage them, and then kick them out. And just to bring this up just so we can recap all the, some of the most important developments. Then a few days ago, it was reported there was another agreement between Hamas and Witkoff, which is the second time in recent memory that this has happened. And immediately, once Israel got word of it, they rejected it, they denounced it, sabotaged it. And once again, as you said earlier, Witkoff came out and said Hamas is making unacceptable demands, which he never ever specifies. He never said what's unacceptable.
We don't know.
So he said this now. This is the second time he's done this. I recall him saying this. I've lost track now when it was, maybe a month ago. That but he only says this after Israel objects to a ceasefire framework that he himself brokers. So every single time Israel has objected, Witkoff has fallen in line.
Every single time. Unacceptable. Disappointing and completely unacceptable, according to Witkoff. And it was the proposal was for a 60-day ceasefire with the release of 5 live hostages on the first day and another 5 living hostages on its last day. And it would have increased humanitarian aid to Gaza, forced the withdrawal of Israeli troops to the lines they were in last March, and will have forced Israel to negotiate and not unilaterally resume the war. So those are the points that Israel objected to, obviously, because look at their conduct today. And Witkoff just said, okay, well, and it's not just Witkoff, it's Miriam Adelson. It's the entire network, the preponderance of Zionist power on the Trump administration that is brought to bear in order to compel total unanimity between Trump and Israel on every negotiating point, which is why the slaughter continues. And we just have no idea when it's going to end. The Europeans obviously sense that the U.S. can't be taken seriously to end this war. And, even Germany, one of the biggest sponsors of the Gaza Holocaust, the second largest sponsor of the Gaza Holocaust next to the U.S., is speaking up for the first time. Here's Chancellor Friedrich Merz.
Das, was die israelische Armee
The Israeli
jetzt im
army is now
Gazastreifen
doing in the
macht.
Gaza Strip.
Ich verstehe offen gestanden nicht mehr, mit welchem Ziel. Die Zivilbevölkerung derart in Mitleidenschaft zu nehmen, wie das in den letzten Tagen
has increasingly been the case in recent days, can no longer be justified as a fight against Hamas terrorism. And, he was met with Israeli Holocaust guilt, of course. But this is really like the Europeans seeking to assert some sort of leverage, because Trump has just shown that he will do nothing to twist Israel's arm, even after Trump himself acknowledged there's nothing strategically for Israel to gain at this point.
So what finally broke the dam for Germany? It's that Israel imposed the starvation siege and openly bragged about it. And I guess finally for some allies, that was just a bridge too far. That it's okay to commit mass murder for a year and a half against a defenseless death camp, but like imposing a more than 80-day starvation siege and openly bragging about it and just mocking everyone who's objecting to it. I guess finally that's what did it. That's what compelled Germany and Canada and the UK and France to speak out.
Yeah, they spoke up. What have they done? Germany has actual leverage. It supplies Israel with 48% of its weapons, and it's not suspending any arms. The UK has issued some sort of individual sanctions on fanatical settlers,
which is such a convenient foil. You pretend as if the problem is some random extremists in the West Bank, not the people in charge of the government across the political spectrum. So the settlers actually serve that purpose. And also they said they're going to suspend talks in a new trade deal with Israel. Yeah, okay. While still, as Matt Kennard, a British journalist, has pointed out tirelessly, still supplying intelligence to Israel to carry out mass murder and weaponry.
Yeah. So it is lip service, too little, too late. The slaughter continues. And Donald Trump continues to pay lip service. I mean, he said that, he wants to wrap up the war. But I saw Alex Jones today, one of Trump's, the biggest pro-Trump propagandist in the media, claiming that Trump is surrounded by figures who won't let him enact his real agenda, and not relating to Israel-Palestine, but it's kind of like maybe that's the case. So Trump didn't defeat the deep state. He's doing this. He's pretty much like playing the role that Biden played, a doddering old man who's lost control of any agenda and is, being puppeteered by figures who have their own ulterior militaristic, globalist agenda.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of Trump fans have been saying this from the start that he's being subverted by his own team and okay, well, at a certain point, maybe it's time to think that like this is Trump's agenda, and he doesn't really have all the things he talks about. Stopping endless wars, America first. I mean, it's great marketing, and he has a big following and a big supportive fan base because of it. But what does he actually do toward that goal? Nothing. And if it's not obvious by now, I mean, maybe it will be by the end of his first term. Second term. Sorry,
second term.
Yeah, second term. Exactly.
It's like it often feels like the third coming of Bush's second term.
Yeah.
Or the third coming of Biden's first term felt like the second coming of Bush's second term.
100%.
No, sorry. Bush's first term was actually worse than the second term, but you know what I'm saying. The neocons, there's just this neocon osmosis.